What's up, guys? Sports Snippets with Dennis Sullivan. It is Sunday the 19th of July. I am so happy that you're here viewing this video as I discuss NBA action, NBA basketball, and what in the world is going to be happening moving forward. Because as we are all aware, the NBA season has been suspended since March. So we're looking at about a 4.5 month, a little bit over a 4.5 month break, if you will, or suspension of the season. Once it does resume, which it is slated to resume on Thursday, July 30th. That's right. So let's get into exactly what I've come up with here to help us prepare, to help us get ready for the conclusion of the 2019-2020 NBA season. If you do like the content, of course, of this video, please don't forget to go ahead below and like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and go ahead and share a comment with me as well. That would be greatly appreciated. So let's get right into it, guys. 5 key points I put down here. First off, 1 through 8. Basically what that means is it's going to be the traditional setting as far as the playoffs goes. So it's 1 through 8 in the East, 1 through 8 in the West. How they're going to actually get to that point, that's where this conversation will begin today. Much different, of course. So they're going to be picking up this season where it left off with pretty much 65 teams being played, 65 games being played. Some teams had 64. Some had 65. I noticed a few maybe had a couple more. You're looking at final 8 games of the season, right? So what they did was they invited 22 teams to Orlando to go ahead and take part in the resuming of the NBA season. Now in Orlando, they are breaking this down, so there's 22 of the 30 teams. So the other 8 teams, they just said, well, you know, thank you, but we don't see you getting into the playoffs here this season, so they weren't invited back, in other words. 22 of the 30 teams that are going to Orlando will be playing, I'm going to jump to number 3 here, an 8-game schedule. And then after those 8 games, we're going to start the traditional playoffs, 1 through 8 in the East, 1 through 8 in the West. In Orlando, they will be playing at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex, which hasn't been around really that long. I'm not going to guess wrong here. I'm going to say a handful of years, though. I mean, it's certainly a host to many sporting events in Orlando. Orlando Kissimmee area. The Braves, I believe, Atlanta Braves had spring training there as well. They will be playing their games at 3 main locations: the Field House, the Arena, and the Visa Athletic Center, all on campus, if you will, at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex. I thought there was a 4th location, but apparently there's not. I thought there was, but apparently there's not a 4th location. So this will be very interesting how this works out. After the 8 games, which will take a couple of weeks to play, the playoffs will start, I'm assuming, right around the middle part of August. Okay? They have an interesting feature this year, which I've never heard of before. It's unique to this situation. It's called the PlayIn. Let's discuss what the PlayIn is here. And guys, if you want to comment below, if I'm off a little bit on this, feel free to correct me below, but this is how I understand it. It's pretty simple, yet it is pretty confusing too, because we've never had this happen before. So here we go. Here's how the play-in works. They play the 8 games first. Okay. They invited 6 extra teams, guys. 6 extra teams to this particular setup in Orlando. So it's the 16 teams that are in the playoffs plus 5 from the West, because the West is much more congested as far as the playoffs go. Portland, the Pelicans, New Orleans Pelicans, the Sacramento Kings, Phoenix Suns, and the Spurs, the San Antonio Spurs. They also invited the Washington Wizards. And then in addition to the 16 top teams. So here's the explanation. So if a team is 9th, because in the East and West there's going to be 8 and 8, right? If a team is 9th at the conclusion of the 8 games, if they are within 4 games, the 9th team that is, of the 8th seeded team, they will play a 2-game playoff, where the 9th seed would have to win both games. Now you might be sitting there going, okay, but if you're behind by 4 games and you beat the 8th seed 2 games in a row, doesn't that mean you're still behind them by 2 games? Apparently, yeah, that would be true, but that's not. They're trying to give everyone a fair chance. Remember, you have to be within 4 games. This really should not impact the East that much. I mean, Washington Wizards about 5.5 games behind as they go into picking up action. Where it will get a little bit crazy, those in the Western Conference, so that will be interesting. So just as a reminder, now remember, they could be 1 or 2 games behind. It'll only get a little weird if they're within 4 games, but they're like right at 4 games, or even 3 games. They will play a 2-game playoff, but that lower seed and the 9th seed would have to win both games. So if the 8th seeded team wins one of those 2, it's all over. The 8th seed goes to the playoffs. So it's a pretty interesting twist. I find that pretty interesting. I think the way that they've done this, especially with the playoffs, they kept the format at the traditional format. That's very important, at least to me as a fan. And that's extremely good to hear, because at first, as you may recall, they were discussing maybe doing an overall playoff with the East and Western Conference. It wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, but I particularly did not like that. So I'm glad to hear they're going with the traditional format. Now, for scenarios, now let's go over real quick the way it looks right now. If the season were to end today, Milwaukee Bucks do have the best record in the Eastern Conference, 53-12. Toronto Raptors are number 2. Celtics at number 3. Miami Heat at number 4, but only 2.5 games behind the Celtics. So, for example, some of the seedings could be switched up or changed in these last 8 games. Where it does really get interesting in the East is that the Pacers, Indiana Pacers and Philadelphia 76ers, they have the same exact record at 39-26. So one of those will get the 5th seed, one will get the 6th, unless, who knows, they could move up. Doesn't look like the Pacers or the 76ers will finish lower than a 6th seed, though, because you have the Nets and the Magic a good 6 games, more like 8 games behind them. So, yeah, I'm looking at this. Indiana Pacers and 76ers almost guaranteed a top 6 seed. Nets are at 30-34. They currently are number 7 in the East. Orlando Magic at 30-35, the 8th seed. Washington Wizards 5.5 behind, as mentioned earlier. No one else invited from the East as part of the 22 teams. In the West, you have the Los Angeles Lakers 49-14, best record in the West. Clippers at 44-20, number 2. The Nuggets only a game and a half behind the Clippers. See, this is where again it gets very interesting. At 43-22, number 4, you have Utah Jazz 41-23. Oklahoma City Thunder having a good season at 40-24. 6th, you have the Rockets at 40-24. So interestingly enough, the East and the West both have a 5th and 6th seeded team with the identical, exact same record when play was paused. That's pretty interesting. Dallas Mavericks played a game or 2 more than everyone else, it seems, at 40-27, just kind of how the schedule worked out. Memphis Grizzlies holding on to the 8th seed at 32-33, and of course the West also invited Portland Trailblazers, Pelicans, Kings, San Antonio Spurs, and Phoenix Suns. Should be very, very interesting, guys, to say the least. All games played in Orlando. That should be interesting at those 3. For some reason I thought, or even as I make this video, I do think that, or thought there was a 4th location where they would play these games, but apparently I checked twice and I keep coming up with 3 locations. But I will still continue to search on my own. For some reason I thought there were 4 different locations. Looking ahead, I mean, guys, this is what it amounts to. I think if you're a basketball fan, this is really what it comes down to. If you're a basketball fan, this is a great thing. The playoffs scenario is going to be the whole 2 weeks when they come back. Because remember, the season was almost completed right? Even with these extra 8 games they're going to be playing regular season, they're only going to be missing out on something like 8 games or so, give or take, roughly 8 or 9 games from a normal regular season on average, right? So it was 81 games. I mean, you're going to be looking at, like the Heat, for example, are at 65 games played before the season was paused, so they'll be at 73. They're almost right at the finish line as far as the total amount of games played. What it's going to amount to is, with the conclusion of the season and these extra 8 games and the playoffs are starting, it's really going to amount to pretty much a normal, almost, season played when you look at the total games played. And they kept the 1 through 8 format. That's key, and I know I've said that before on this video. I think that's extremely important. So when all is said and done, you're only looking at about 7, 8, 9 games missed from a from a pretty long regular season and a normal playoff format, which playoffs being held at a neutral site, which is pretty crazy, but that's what they got to do, right? You got to do what you got to do. So let's see what happens. Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, they kind of come to mind because remember, they had the 1 seed in the East last year. The Toronto Raptors got hot with Kawhi. They won the East and the NBA championship, as they pretty much should have done, based on the way that they played. I don't mean Toronto should have or was expected to. They were one of the top teams, but the way they were playing with Kawhi, I mean, they should have, won the NBA championship, and they did. The Bucks at 53-12 this year certainly have a great chance to make the finals, where last year they came just short. So, I mean, I would like to see, in a way, Milwaukee Bucks get to the finals only for that reason. I mean, they've been knocking on the door for a while here. West will be interesting because you have LeBron and Kawhi, first seasons on their respective teams, the Lakers and the Clippers, and they're both atop the Western Conference. Western Conference pretty much wide open in a way. The East kind of is too, but Milwaukee's definitely the favorite there. This season was a collision course in a way for the finals between the Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks. They were the best team during the regular season. Will the break hurt them? That remains to be seen. Will the break help certain teams? That remains to be seen. Remember, this is over a 4-month layoff, so chances are, guys, certain teams are going to be very much helped by this whole thing. They healed up their injuries, they rested up, they got themselves back to where they need to be. So all these questions will be answered for us starting on July 30th. I'm happy the league is getting restarted. I certainly hope that you are too. Basketball's returning on July 30th, NBA basketball. This is Dennis Sullivan saying I will see you, that's right, you, next time. Go ahead, leave a comment below if you do like the content of this video. Please don't forget to like the video as well, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.